At the edge of the desert, a sand vortex appeared, swallowing the entire city. What do you see when you look into the darkness? The vast desert stretches to the horizon, where the sand glistens like gold under the sun. At its edge once stood a city, surrounded by tall walls of stone the color of blood. The inhabitants called it Zahir, a place full of life, a market filled with the scent of spices and the laughter of children. Streams of water from crystalline springs flowed through the streets, and in the market square stood a statue of the god of sands, whose eyes were adorned with emeralds. The ancestors believed that the city was protected by a powerful force hidden beneath the earth, and every stone bore the seal of ancient spirits. One night, strange lights illuminated the sky, and the wind began to howl like a voice from the beyond. The residents rushed to the squares, hearing the roar of the earth cracking, and the air was filled with the scent of burning resin. Then the ground trembled, and the walls started to crack like the shell of an egg. The woman stared at the shimmering symbols on the parchment, their shapes shifting under the moonlight. Around her, the sand formed irregular patterns, as if invisible hands were drawing a map of forgotten paths. Suddenly, she heard a soft rustle. Something moved among the dunes. She turned sharply, but saw only the flickering shadows of trees that had long since vanished from this place. A fine dust rose from the ground beneath her feet, and a chill pierced the air, one that did not belong to the hot desert. Amid the swirling columns of sand, a glow of fire appeared, casting long shadows over the scattered stones. The woman felt her hands begin to tremble as the sword in her grip heated to a white-hot blaze. Figures emerged from the earth, warriors clad in armor from long past times, their eyes burning with an unquenchable light, their breath mingling with the scent of smoke and burnt resin. Their bodies were transparent, yet every movement stirred the rustle of chains and the clinking of metal. They stood in silence, ready for the summons that could restore the city's former power or plunge it forever into darkness. The woman looked at the pulsating seal, whose red glow spread across the sand like a river of fire. From the mountain rocks came the sound of breaking stone, and the sand beneath her feet began to rise, forming swirling patterns reminiscent of ancient runes. Around her, a circle of light appeared, seeming to shield her from the cold breath rising from the depths of the earth. At that moment, another figure emerged from the darkness, a young boy with eyes full of fear and hope, holding a fragment of a broken amulet in his hands. The earth split open with a wide crack that quickly swallowed the entire city. Stones fell into a deep abyss, and the water vanished into the crevices, leaving only a dry, cracked bottom on the surface. Those who tried to escape felt the sand beneath their feet grow sticky, as if the earth itself wanted to hold them back. Amid the chaos appeared an old man holding an ancient metal seal, the symbol of the ancestors. His voice echoed like a cave as he called out to the spirits for forgiveness. The earth trembled once more, and the roar reverberated off the nearby rocks. At that moment, a glow appeared, piercing the night and revealing sculptures carved in the sand, depicting people with eyes full of tears and fear. Someone noticed that the old man's seal began to heat up and pulse, and symbols of unknown power appeared around it. The ancestors were meant to protect the city from the wrath of the gods, but something went wrong. The earth swallowed Zahir, along with all the knowledge and history that sank beneath the sand. Among the ruins that remained, only fragments of pottery and ashes were found, on which the marks of the past were painted. The inhabitants of nearby villages spoke of ghosts wandering at night, searching for a path to the light. while the sand at the edge of the desert seemed to whisper forgotten songs to them. The few brave souls who tried to explore the place returned with eyes full of sand and hearts heavy with unspoken fear. Among them was a young woman who found an old parchment on the edge of the desert, containing notes about a ritual meant to protect the city from destruction. However, the words on the parchment were incomplete, and the seal on its edge seemed to pulse under her touch. Her decision was clear. She had to find the rest of the notes to understand what truly happened that night. She set out into the desert, where the wind stirred the dunes and shadows seemed to dance in the moonlight. Every step she took echoed in the emptiness, and in the distance, faint, almost human sighs could be heard. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and from the sand emerged an old, moss-covered sculpture, a sign that the ancestors were still watching. The woman bent down, touching the stone with a cool hand, and felt the ancient power flowing through her veins. She knew that she not only had to uncover the truth about Zahir, but also stop the force that still slumbered beneath the sand. At that moment, the wind carried the scent of burnt resin, and a song could be heard, seeming to come from the very heart of the earth. The future of the city hangs by a thread, and the boundary between life and death blurs among the endless dunes. Her hands clenched the parchment as she noticed the engraved symbols beginning to pulse with a red glow. She now heard faint whispers, as if the very spirits of her ancestors were trying to convey a warning. In the distance, the outline of a figure appeared, a tall man with a scarred face, dressed in garments made of fabrics from centuries past. He did not move, but his eyes gleamed in the darkness like two little flames. The woman felt her heart quicken, and the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. From the depths of the dune emerged an old stone gate covered in moss, forgotten by all. She opened it slowly, revealing a dark crevice from which cold and the scent of dampness emanated. Inside the gate stood a sculpture of a warrior, whose sword was moss-covered and whose face was twisted in an eternal scream. The woman felt the weight of time pressing down on this place, as if every stone carried the memories of lost generations. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing off the damp walls. At the bottom of the crevice, she saw a pool of water, its surface reflecting the starlight. The water was clear, but shadows flickered in its depths, as if something lived beneath the surface. The woman dipped her hand in, and then the water began to move, forming a whirlpool that pulled her into its cool embrace. She held her breath as she felt the ground tremble around her, and a deep drumbeat echoed all around. A figure emerged from the water, a woman with long black hair, dressed in robes woven from sand and mist. Her eyes were like two lakes full of secrets, and around her neck hung an amulet made of bone and emeralds. She came from the depths to tell of the covenant made between humans and the spirits of the desert. Her voice rang out like a song, carrying forgotten hymns and spells meant to protect Zahir from the wrath of the gods. The woman listened intently, feeling the ancient powers awakening within her. She knew she had to find the remaining fragments of the ritual to seal the power and restore balance. Suddenly, footprints appeared on the sand, not hers, but those of an invisible companion guiding her through the darkness. Each step revealed new secrets, abandoned tools, decayed parchments, and stone tablets covered in runes. In the distance, lights flashed that did not come from the stars. They were fires burning on the hills where the city's watchtowers once stood. The woman headed in that direction, and the wind carried the sounds of drums and songs, as if the spirits of her ancestors were calling her to the final battle. With each step, the ground beneath her feet grew less stable, and the sand slipped through her fingers. reminding her of life's fleeting nature. She reached a stone circle, scattered with fragments of seals and amulets. In the center of the circle lay an old, rusted sword, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. The woman lifted him from the ground, and then a roar echoed. The earth shook violently, and sand began to rise in swirling columns. The air filled with the scent of burnt resin and incense, and around her appeared the shadows of warriors who once defended the city. The wind carried with it the whisper of prayers and curses, mingling with the sound of sand slipping through fingers. The woman felt drops of cold dew on her skin, despite the scorching desert heat. From beyond the horizon came the sound of drums, unlike any known rhythm. They were the drums of the earth, beating in the heart of the world, reminding of the ancient power trapped beneath the surface. Each step brought her closer to the boundary between life and death, between light and darkness. New tracks appeared in the sand, this time not human, but animal, resembling the footprints of great desert predators. The woman followed them, leading herself to a place where the earth was cracked in the shape of a spider's web. In those fissures, one could feel a pulsating energy that seemed to live its own life. From inside one of them came a cool breeze, carrying the scent of herbs and smoke, as if the spirits of ancestors were preparing her for the ultimate challenge. The woman stood at the edge of a deep ravine, from which a hot breeze rose. In her hand, she clutched a piece of parchment, whose symbols began to glow with a pale light. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and from within the ravine emerged a figure, a spirit ancestor, with eyes like two burning embers. His voice was cold and full of despair as he warned of the awakening force the city tried to hide. The woman pulled out the seal, which now pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She touched the stone statue of the god of sands with it, and the earth began to close, as if trying to swallow everything back. The spirit vanished, and the wind fell silent, leaving a silence filled with dust and calm. The city of Zahir sank into the sand, but thanks to the courage of one person, the legend would not die. The woman looked up at the starry sky and felt that her ancestors still guarded the boundary between the world of the living and what lay buried beneath the earth. Their eyes gleamed with blue light, and their voices pierced the silence, conveying warnings and blessings. The woman felt the power of her ancestors merging with her own strength. She knew she had to unite the scattered fragments of the seal to close the rift and trap the fury that slumbered beneath the sand. In her hands, the metal heated to a glowing red, and the earth began to close up once more. With a final movement of her hand, she joined the elements of the seal, which sparked with magical light, illuminating the night. The sand stopped swirling, and the air calmed, as if the desert had taken a breath after a long sleep. The woman looked up at the sky, where the stars twinkled more peacefully, and among them appeared a new sign, the silhouette of a bird, a symbol of freedom and protection. She understood that the evil that had consumed Zahir had been trapped thanks to her courage. The duchies of the ancestors slowly vanished, and their songs turned into a quiet whisper carried by the wind. The desert was silent once again, but deep beneath the sand, a power smoldered that must never be forgotten. The woman set off on her journey back, leaving behind traces meant to remind future generations of the price paid for peace. Then the earth trembled once more, and long, thin roots began to grow from the cracks, wrapping around the stones and forming something like a living web. The woman felt her body fill with ancient power, and her voice began to sing a song that seemed to connect the world of the living with the realm of spirits. A misty aurora appeared in the sky, its colors intertwining with the moonlight, creating a bridge between the two worlds. Among the swirling shadows, the spirit of the warrior appeared once again, this time with a sword raised high. His gaze was full of blessing and sorrow. The woman understood that she had to join forces with the spirits to prevent evil from spreading beyond the desert's borders. With each word of the song, the seal in her hands glowed brighter and brighter, and the crack in the ground began to close, as if the desert itself wanted to swallow what was dangerous. When the last sign of the ritual was spoken, the wind fell silent, and the sand settled quietly on the earth. The woman felt the weight on her heart lift, and the air was filled with the scent of freshly baked bread and wild herbs. In the distance, the song of birds could be heard, returning to the desert landscape, carrying with them a promise of renewal and hope. Sometimes what lies beneath the surface hides truths that should never see the light of day. The ghosts of the past remind us that the boundaries between life and oblivion are as thin as desert sand. Let us remember that every stone and every trace carries a story worth respecting and listening to. Subscribe to discover more African legends. Ash settles on the stones, and the night grows quiet once again.